My daughter has given me nothing but disappointment." The words cracked across crystal and marble, and 280 guests stopped mid-sip. Chandeliers hummed, a string quartet faltered into silence. At the center of the Sinclair ballroom, Gareth Sinclair stood tall in a tuxedo that fit like armor, one hand lifting the mic, the other resting on the shoulder of Cole Maddox, the golden boy who had once laughed in my face senior year for playing soldier. "This," my father said, squeezing Cole's shoulder for the room to see, "is what success looks like. Finance, real results, not years wasted in boots." Polite laughter rippled, thin, obedient. Heat climbed my neck, but my spine stayed straight. I'd learned long ago never to give him the flinch he wanted. Cole angled the mic toward himself, easy grin loaded with history. "Some of us grow out of our phases," he said, eyes flicking to me, inviting the room to smirk with him. My father lifted his glass. "To men who carry families forward." A few people actually cheered. The quartet pretended to tune. Somewhere, a fork tapped a flute. I stepped toward the dais. "That's enough, Dad." He turned with that effortless public smile that always meant private menace. "Avery, don't embarrass yourself." Or me. He reached, not for the mic, not for the glass, but for my wrist, meaning to guide me back a step the way he used to when I was 12 and inconvenient. His fingers never closed. A hand, steady, calloused, unshakable, caught Gareth Sinclair's wrist midair. Logan Ward didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Sir," my fiancé said, calm as a safety clicked on. "That's far enough." The ballroom inhaled. Every guest froze, crystal glasses suspended like ornaments in midair. My father, the titan of Sinclair Holdings, stood locked in my fiancé's grip. It was the first time anyone had ever dared stop him in public. "Release me," he hissed, his polished charm cracking. Logan didn't move. His jaw was steady, his stance rooted. He wasn't just a guest in a tailored suit. He was the man who had led SEAL teams through kill zones, the man who had held men together when plans tore apart. Compared to that, a CEO's fury was nothing. "You don't lay hands on her," Logan said, low but carrying. "Not tonight. Not ever." A murmur stirred. Heads turned. The Sinclair myth that Gareth Sinclair commanded every room wavered for the first time. My father yanked his wrist back, glaring, as though sheer force of reputation could make Logan bow. But Logan's gaze didn't break, and in that silence, something shifted. I felt the entire room weighing me, the forgotten daughter, the soldier they never understood, against the empire of my father's voice. And for the first time, the scale wasn't tipping his way. Then Cole Maddox, desperate to reclaim the spotlight, let out a strained laugh. Whoa, let's not get dramatic. It's just a toast." But it was too late. The fracture had already opened, and no amount of champagne could cover it. The champagne in my glass rippled with the tremor in my hand. It wasn't the confrontation itself that made my chest tighten. It was how familiar the sting felt. Because Gareth Sinclair had been doing this all my life. He was the man the city admired, the patriarch with the empire, the voice that silenced rooms and signed contracts that shifted skylines. To the world, he was legacy incarnate. To me, he was the reminder that I had failed him from the moment I was born without a Y chromosome. I was 12 the first time he told me I wasn't enough. The study smelled of leather and expensive scotch. the windows glowing with winter dusk. I'd handed him my report card, all A's. He barely glanced before setting it aside. "Grades are paper," he said, eyes already back on the stock reports. "Power is what matters. And power, Avery, doesn't come from little girls." That sentence carved itself into my spine. So I ran the only direction left, the military, where discipline was currency, where no one cared that my last name could open doors, where strength wasn't inherited, it was earned. But even when I earned it, even when the Navy gave me a uniform, a rank, a calling, Gareth still called me a disappointment. And here we were again, in a ballroom that smelled of roses and bourbon, the air charged with whispers, my father's shadow pressing down on me. Only this time, Logan's hand had broken through it. The silence in the ballroom wasn't quiet. It pulsed, heavy as artillery waiting to fire. Forks hovered above plates. A chandelier crystal quivered as though it too had heard my father's verdict. Disappointment. Garrett's hand stayed clamped on Logan's wrist, the gesture deliberate, proprietary, as if my fiancé was a medal he could pin to his lapel. "This," my father declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "is what honor looks like. A man forged in combat, a protector, the kind of man this family deserves." He might as well have been chiseling my epitaph, but Logan didn't lower his head. His eyes, dark and steady, cut through the hush. Slowly, he turned his wrist inside Gareth's grip, not with force, but with the calm of someone who had wrestled larger storms. His voice, when it came, was low, yet it carried more weight than my father's booming pride. "Sir," he said, each word measured. "With respect, Avery has protected more lives than most men I've ever served with." A murmur rippled. Someone's glass clinked against the table. My chest tightened, half terror, half relief. For the first time in years, someone had placed me in the light instead of the shadow. And Gareth Sinclair, master of every room he'd ever stepped into, actually faltered. My father's laugh cracked sharp, a weapon disguised as mirth. "Protect lives?" he sneered, releasing Logan's wrist as if swatting a fly. "Avery files papers. She shuffles charts. Don't dress her up in glory she never earned." The insult landed like shrapnel, designed not to wound me alone, but to scatter through the crowd. Heads turned, eyebrows raised. Old neighbors, his business partners, retired officers, all nodding along with the man they still called Colonel Sinclair. But Logan didn't flinch. His gaze swept the room, then anchored on my father. "With all due respect, sir, you don't know her the way I do." The Navy didn't call her Black Widow for nothing. The words struck like a flare in the dark. A few gasps broke the surface. One of the older men at the back sat forward. A younger woman's fan stilled midair. The name traveled quickly, whispered table to table, gathering weight. Black Widow. It wasn't a title I ever asked for. It was given on nights when chaos threatened to consume us, when plans unraveled and men twice my size looked to me for the thread that would lead them home alive. My father blinked, confusion tightening around his eyes. He'd spent years dismissing me, certain that if I wore a uniform, it was decoration. He never knew the name that lived in shadows, the name that made even sails listen when I spoke. And now, in a hall of polished silver and crystal chandeliers, it had surfaced. The ground beneath him shifted, and for the first time that night, he had no script. The ballroom was no longer still. It hummed. Whispers darted from table to table like sparks chasing dry grass. "Black Widow?" someone mouthed. "Is that true?" another asked, though too softly to expect an answer. I stood frozen, spine straight, every instinct telling me not to show what I carried. My father's jaw tightened. He swept the room with the authority of a man used to commanding silence. But silence no longer belonged to him. Logan didn't look away. He let the title linger, daring the crowd to let it take root. I could feel their eyes pressing on me, demanding explanation, demanding proof. But proof wasn't born in chandelier light and polished marble. Proof was born years earlier, in the grit of foreign sand and the static of radios on nights when everything went wrong. The name had teeth because it came from places my father had never dared step into, and as their murmurs grew, I could almost smell it again. The diesel fumes, the salt air, the gunmetal tang of a night when silence was survival, and hesitation meant death. That was the night Black Widow was born. It was somewhere no tourist map would ever mark. A coastal city where the air stank of diesel and salt, where narrow alleys twisted like veins and shadows carried knives. I wasn't supposed to be there to fight. My orders were clear: observe, coordinate, make sure the plan held together. The SEALs carried rifles. I carried a radio, a notebook, and the weight of being the one who had to keep a dozen moving parts from collapsing. But plans don't bleed until they break, and that night, the plan snapped. A convoy stalled 2 blocks early. A power line went dark when it should have stayed lit. And suddenly, the man we'd come to find, an architect of explosions, was slipping into a doorway we hadn't mapped. Voices spiked over the comms. 2 men argued which way to turn. Another cursed when his GPS blinked out. Chaos pressed down like a hand over the throat. That's when I heard it, the subtle shift, the thread vibrating through the noise, the sound no one else noticed. A pattern in his footsteps, a door hinge straining open, the rhythm of his escape. Not left, church route. Now, I ordered. There was no time to explain, only to act. The team obeyed. Years of discipline made them trust tone more than logic. They pivoted, split, and surged down the street I'd marked. And there he was, our target, caught mid-stride, expecting shadows, finding instead the steel of men who trusted a plan none of them had seen, but all of them followed. No shots fired, no casualties, just silence reclaiming a city block. Back at base, someone slapped a crude drawing of a spider on the map I'd sketched. A laugh, a joke, until the name stuck. "She weaves the net," one said. "And waits," another added. "Black Widow," Hill muttered, half amused, half in awe. From then on, it wasn't just a nickname. It was a warning, whispered between men who'd survived nights that should have swallowed them whole. Trust isn't built in a single mission. It's stacked, night after night, like sandbags against a rising tide. At first, some of the SELs dismissed me. Torres especially, sharp-eyed, quick with a joke. "Paperwork in uniform," he muttered once, loud enough for me to hear. "She's here to take notes, not bullets." I let him talk. Words don't stop bullets either. But when the convoy wheels hit mud, when the comms went static in the middle of a breach, when the wrong door swung open, my voice was there. Calm, steady, calculated. "Hold 2. Entry through window, not door. Shift to fallback Charlie. 3 minutes, not 5. Target will reach East Alley in 12 seconds. Move now." They followed, not because I was louder, but because every time they did, they walked back alive. Hill was the first to say it out loud. After a night when we pulled out with all men intact, something rare enough to feel like a miracle, he tapped the edge of my map with a gloved finger. "You don't just write plans," he said. "You hear the web before it shakes." From then on, the jokes quieted. Torres stopped calling me paperwork. He started groping for his gear faster whenever I spoke. And Ethan, he was still new then, younger, all nerves under his helmet, stared at me like someone seeing gravity for the first time. He never said it then, but later, years later, he would. That night in the ballroom, when he spoke my name to a room full of doubters, it was because of these nights. The nights when Black Widow wasn't just a nickname. It was the reason they came home. I was 8 years old, standing on the small stage of St. Mary's Elementary School with a Student of the Year certificate in my hand. The stage lights were blinding, making me squint to find my parents in the crowd. Mom sat in the front row, her eyes shining brightly, clapping her hands as if she wanted to fly. Next to her, Dad sat straight-backed in his gray suit, but his eyes were glued to his BlackBerry. "Daddy!" I ran to him right after the award ceremony, holding up the certificate high. "I came first in the whole school!" My father looked up from his phone, glancing at the certificate with indifference. "Girls just need to be pretty, Sarah. Being too smart will make you unmarriageable." I stood there, the certificate heavy in my small hands, not understanding why the joy in my heart had just died. Mom put her hand on my shoulder, squeezing gently. "Mommy's proud of you, sweetheart," but her voice seemed to be swallowed by the phone ringing and Dad's voice. "David, my son, will be different. Boys need to be smart." David was only 5 then, sitting in his stroller chewing candy, couldn't even read yet. But Dad was already certain my little brother would be different. I was 12, standing in the corner of the living room, watching Dad teach David to hold a golf club. My brother clumsily swung the club, the ball flying everywhere, but Dad patiently adjusted his hands, his stance, never losing his smile. "My son needs to learn how to master everything," Dad said. "Golf is a CEO's sport, David." I stood by the door, my throat dry. "Daddy, can I learn golf too?" Dad turned around, his eyebrows furrowing as if I'd said something bizarre. "Girls should learn piano, ballet, things that are gentle. Golf is for men." "But I want to learn—" "Sarah," Dad's voice hardened. "Girls don't argue with their fathers. Go practice piano." I learned piano. For 6 years, my fingers memorized every note of Chopin, Beethoven. But Dad never sat down to listen to me play. He only asked, "Does Sarah know how to cook yet? Does she know how to sew? Wives need those skills." The night my mother died, I was 16, sitting by the hospital bed holding her small hand as it grew cold. The smell of disinfectant stung my nose. The artificial breathing machine had just been turned off, leaving behind heavy silence. Dr. Catherine Mitchell, the woman who had saved hundreds of heart patients, lay quietly with pale lips. "Mom," I whispered, tears falling onto the white sheet. "I'll miss you forever." Mom's hand squeezed back one last time, weak but determined. Her lips moved barely. "Sweetheart, be strong in your own way. Don't let anyone define you." Those were the last words Mom said to me. Dad stood in the corner of the room, his face stone cold, his phone still buzzing in his hand. He didn't cry. He only said, "No one will protect you anymore, Sarah. You need to learn how to be a proper woman." I didn't understand what that sentence meant. My mother had just died, and Dad was only thinking about me being a proper woman? That night, I found Mom's medical notebook on her desk. Pages of yellowed paper, small handwritten notes about each surgery. And on the last page, a line in blue ink. True strength is quiet, steady, and earned, not given. I hugged the notebook to my chest, breathing in the scent of medicine still lingering on the pages. I was 17, sitting at the breakfast table with a Naval Academy application trembling in my hands. David was eating cereal, Dad reading the Wall Street Journal. "Daddy," I gathered all my courage. "I want to apply to the Naval Academy." David's spoon hitting his bowl stopped immediately. The newspaper in Dad's hands lowered slowly. "What?" "I want to become a naval officer. Like Mom wanted me to be strong." Dad stood up, his chair scraping back with a loud noise. His face turned red. "Are you insane? Mitchell daughters don't become soldiers." "But Daddy..." "No buts." Dad snatched the application from my hands, tearing it apart right in front of me. White paper pieces fell to the floor like snow. "I will not let you disgrace this family." I knelt down, trembling as I picked up each piece of paper. My hands tried to put together the torn words, United States Naval Academy. "Girls need to know their place," Dad said, his voice cold as ice. "You will study business, then marry some CEO. That's how daughters are useful." David looked at me with painful eyes, but he didn't dare say anything. That night, I lay in bed, clutching Mom's Mont Blanc pen, the only thing Mom had left me. The cold, heavy metal in my palm felt like a reminder of quiet strength. I was 18, sitting in the school counselor's office with Mrs. Peterson, my advisor. On the desk was a stack of college applications, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, all business schools. "Sarah, are you sure you don't want to try medical school?" Mrs. Peterson asked. "You have a 4.0 GPA, perfect SAT scores. You could get into anywhere." I shook my head. "My father wants me to study business." "But what do you want?" That question hit like a punch to the chest. What did I want? In 18 years, no one had ever asked me that. I hesitated. "I want to be strong, like my mom, but in a different way." Mrs. Peterson leaned down, wrote something on a piece of paper, then pushed it toward me. United States Naval Academy. Application deadline, January 31st. I looked at those words, my heart pounding. "But my father..." "Sarah," Mrs. Peterson looked straight into my eyes. "There are times when you have to choose between pleasing your parents and pleasing yourself. You're 18 years old. This is your decision." That night, I sat in my room with Mom's pen, filling out every line of the application form. Each question felt like a challenge. "Why do you want to serve your country?" I wrote, "Because strength should protect others, not just impress them." "What makes you qualified for military leadership?" "I've been fighting battles my whole life. Now, I want to fight ones that matter." When I submitted the application, I knew I was burning bridges with Dad. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was doing the right thing. 4 months later, I held the acceptance letter from the Naval Academy in my hands. My hands shook like leaves. Dad was sitting in his study, reading financial reports. I walked in, the letter in my hand like a ticking bomb. "Daddy, I have something to tell you." He looked up, seeing my expression, his eyebrows furrowed. I held out the letter. "I got accepted to the Naval Academy." Dad read the letter, his face changing from surprise to anger, then to something colder. "You did this behind my back. I'm 18. I have the right to choose." Dad stood up, tall and intimidating in the office lighting. "If you go, don't expect me to consider you my daughter anymore." Those words stabbed into my chest like a knife. But I still stood straight, gripping Mom's pen tightly in my pocket. "Then I'll go." And that was the last time Dad spoke to me for the next 17 years. Until tonight, when he called me his biggest failure in front of 280 people, I finally understood. Dad had never forgiven me for daring to choose my own path. Annapolis, Maryland, July 2006. I stood in formation with 1,200 other freshmen, sweat dripping under my stiff white hat. Induction day, first day at the Naval Academy. Around me were faces of 18, 19-year-olds, mostly male. I counted about 200 female students in the entire class. "Mitchell," a drill instructor roared, "do you think this is summer camp?" I straightened up. "No, sir." "I can't hear you." "No, sir," I shouted with all the strength in my lungs. The large man stepped closer, his face inches from mine. "Does this daddy's princess think she'll get special treatment?" I looked straight into his eyes. "No, sir. I'm here to earn my place." He stared at me for a long time, then nodded. "We'll see." The first month was hell. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. to reveille, ran 5 miles before breakfast, studied 18 credit hours, military training until 10 p.m., then homework until 2 a.m. The male cadets in my squadron looked at me like a curiosity. Some acted friendly but protective. Others were skeptical. "She won't survive," I heard Hayes whisper to Anderson when they thought I wasn't listening. "Girls don't belong in the Navy." I said nothing. I just worked harder. When they ran 5 miles, I ran 7. When they did 50 push-ups, I did 70. When they studied until 1 a.m., I studied until 1 a.m. third. By the end of the first month, I ranked 15th out of 1,200 students academically, 8th in physical fitness, and I had never cried, not even once. Second year, I was selected for the brigade boxing team. First time a female student had made the team. "Mitchell," Coach Thompson said in the training room, the smell of sweat and leather heavy in the air. "You'll have to fight both men and women. Are you ready?" I wrapped my hands, tested my fists. "Yes, sir." My first match, I faced Kevin Walsh, 6 feet 2 inches, 180 pounds, former Golden Gloves champion of Maryland. "Easy there, Walsh," someone shouted from the stands. "Don't hurt the princess." Laughter rang out. I felt my cheeks burn, but not from shame. The bell rang. Walsh charged in, confident and powerful. His first punch hit my shoulder, making me stagger, but I remembered Mom's words. True strength is quiet, steady, and earned. I didn't charge in. I observed, studied his pattern. Walsh hit hard but wild. He left his flank exposed after every left hook. Round 2, I started counterattacking, Quick jabs, precise, targeting weak points. Walsh began to get frustrated. Round 3, he lost his composure, charged in reckless. I dodged, pivoted, and landed a perfect right cross to his jawline. Walsh went down. The gymnasium fell completely silent, then erupted in applause. Coach Thompson ran into the ring, raising my hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he shouted into the microphone, "the winner by knockout, Sarah Mitchell." That was the first time I felt like I belonged at Annapolis. 3rd year, I was chosen as battalion commander, leading 300 midshipmen, 280 male, 20 female. "Mitchell," the commandant said in his office, "you'll face resistance. Some will question your authority just because you're a woman. Sir, I'll lead by example. I know you will. But you need to understand, this isn't just about you. You're representing every woman who will come after." That pressure weighed like lead on my shoulders. My first month as battalion commander, I had to deal with Rodriguez, a large second-year midshipman from Brooklyn with an attitude problem. "I don't take orders from a little girl," he said in front of the entire platoon. All 40 people stood silent, waiting to see how I would react. I stepped closer to Rodriguez, looking straight into his eyes. My voice was calm but steel. "Midshipman Rodriguez, you have 2 choices. 1 is to respect rank and follow orders. 2 is to pack your bags and go home. You can't, I can, and I will. In the Navy, respect isn't about gender. It's about competence and character. Do you have both?" Rodriguez looked around, realizing the entire platoon was waiting for his answer. "Yes, ma'am." "Louder." "Yes, ma'am." From then on, I never had discipline problems again. Graduation Day, May 2010. I stood in dress whites, valedictorian of Naval Academy, class of 2010. Started with 1,200 students, only 980 remained. I didn't just survive, I thrived. Families filled the stadium. I scanned the crowd, a small part of my heart still hoping. David was there, sitting in the 3rd row, waving enthusiastically. But the seat next to him was empty. My father didn't come. After the ceremony, David ran over and hugged me tight. "Sis, I'm so proud of you, I can't put it into words." "What about Daddy?" David's smile faded. "You know, he's still disappointed." I finished the sentence. But this time, I didn't hurt. I had something else now. I had the respect of 979 classmates. I had bars on my uniform. I had a future in the Navy. August 2010. BUD Training, Coronado, California. Basic Underwater DEMOLITION and SEAL Training, where 75% of men drop out. I was the first woman ever allowed to attempt it. "Mitchell," Instructor Chief Wilson said on the first day, "you know the statistics, right? 3/4 of people here will quit. Do you think you're special?" "No, Chief. I think I'm prepared." The next 6 months were the most brutal of my life. 4 a.m., cold water surf torture. Lying in 50-degree water, waves crashing over us for 2 hours. 6 a.m., 4-mile beach run in boots. 8 a.m., obstacle course. 15 obstacles, Had to complete under 10 minutes, 30 seconds. 10 a.m. Pool competition. Underwater swimming with hands tied, no breathing. Afternoon. Weapons training, tactics, survival. Evening. Study until midnight. Each week, fewer people. Week 1, 200 candidates. Week 4, 120. Week 8, 80. Week 12, 60. Hell Week, Week 4, was the worst. 5 days with only 4 hours of total sleep. Non-stop exercise, cold water, mud, carrying boats on our heads. Day 3 of Hell Week, I nearly broke. Hypothermia setting in, muscles screaming, mind fuzzy from sleep deprivation. Johnson, a guy from Texas, collapsed next to me in the mud pit. I can't do this anymore, he whispered. I crawled over, grabbed his hand. Yes, you can. We do this together. I helped him up, supported him through the next 2 hours. 10 people quit that day. Johnson and I weren't 2 of them. Graduation from Bud training, February 2011. 25 people survived. 1 woman. Me. Chief Wilson shook my hand, respect clear in his eyes. Mitchell, I've trained over 1,000 SEALs in my career. You're one of the toughest I've ever seen. I received my SEAL Trident, the Golden Eagle with anchor, trident, and flintlock pistol, symbol of those trained to do the impossible. This time, I didn't scan the crowd looking for Dad. I knew he wasn't there. But I also knew something else. I had proven wrong every person who ever doubted me, including him. The next 10 years would be about combat deployments, life and death missions, and slowly earning the title Admiral. But the question still burned in my heart. Would it ever be enough? Would Dad ever see me as worthy? The answer would come on gala night, when 280 of New York's most powerful people were about to discover who Sarah Mitchell really is. 10 years after graduating from SEAL training, I had become Admiral Sarah Mitchell. 4 stars on my shoulder. The youngest female admiral in Navy history. Saved 73 lives. Neutralized 15 high-value targets. Medal of Honor recipient. But my father still didn't know. 17 years of silence. 17 years without a phone call, without a text message, without a single word of inquiry. Not even when I made the news after Operation Silent Storm. Not even when the president awarded me the Medal of Honor at the White House. Complete radio silence. Saturday afternoon, I stood in front of the closet in my Manhattan apartment, looking at the black dress hanging quietly. James sat on the bed, adjusting his cufflinks. "Are you sure you want to go?" he asked, his voice gentle but concerned. "The Mitchell Foundation Gala," I said, fingers tracing the fabric of the dress. "David sent the invitation. Said Dad would be there." "After 17 years?" "After 17 years. James stood up, hands on my shoulders. "You don't have to prove anything to him anymore." I turned around, looking into his steady brown eyes. James, the man who had stood beside me through 8 years of deployments, 15 combat missions, countless nights when I woke up screaming from PTSD. "You're right," I whispered. "But I need closure." St. Regis Hotel Ballroom, 8 p.m. We stepped out of the elevator, and I was immediately overwhelmed by the luxury. Crystal chandeliers casting golden light, marble floors reflecting elegantly dressed guests, 280 of New York's most powerful people, CEOs, politicians, old money families. James took my arm, steady and reassuring. "Ready?" I took a deep breath. "Ready." We walked in together, me in a black evening gown, simple but elegant. James in a navy suit, clean-cut and handsome. We looked like any other affluent couple, but in my small clutch I carried Mom's Mont Blanc pen, my only connection to who I used to be. "Sarah!" David's voice cut across the conversations. My brother approached, a slightly nervous smile, immaculate tuxedo. "You made it." He hugged me, whispering in my ear, "He's here." Front table. I looked across the ballroom. There he was, William Mitchell. 62 now, silver hair at his temples, still commanding presence in an expensive tuxedo. He was laughing with a group of men, gesturing with his wine glass. 17 years, and he looked exactly as I remembered. Confident, powerful, completely unaware that the daughter he had once disowned was standing 50 feet away. "Do you want me to introduce you?" David asked. "Not yet." I squeezed James's hand. "Let me observe first." Dinner began. James and I were seated at table 12, far from the head table, among younger executives and their wives, perfect for blending in. My father sat at table 1, surrounded by corporate titans. I watched him throughout the appetizer course. Still charismatic, still the center of attention, still completely convinced he was the most important person in the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC announced, "please welcome our host, William Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Capital Group." 280 people applauded as my father approached the podium. He looked distinguished under the spotlights, every inch the successful businessman. "Thank you all for joining the Mitchell Foundation's annual charity gala," he began, his voice carrying easily across the ballroom. "Tonight, we celebrate family values, community support, and the importance of raising successful children." I nearly choked on my wine. "As many of you know," he continued, "I've always believed in traditional family structure, strong fathers, nurturing mothers, children who understand their roles in society." James's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. "I'm proud to say I've raised 2 children. My son David, sitting right there." The spotlight found David, who waved awkwardly. Applause. "Harvard MBA. Brilliant mind. Soon to take over company operations. Everything a father could want in a son." More applause. David looked uncomfortable with the praise. And then, my father paused, his expression shifting slightly. "There's my daughter, Sarah." My heart stopped. 280 faces turned, searching the crowd. I sat perfectly still, hoping to remain invisible. Sarah chose a different path. Against family wishes, against common sense, against everything I tried to teach her about being a proper young lady. Nervous laughter from some guests. She decided to join the military instead of finding a suitable husband. Can you imagine? A Mitchell daughter choosing to play soldier instead of embracing femininity. Play soldier. Those words hit like a physical blow. James tensed beside me, his jaw clenching. "I tried everything," Dad continued, warming to his topic. "Piano lessons, etiquette classes, introductions to appropriate young men from good families. But Sarah was stubborn." More laughter, louder now. "She's 35 years old now, still unmarried, still playing around with military people. Honestly, I don't know where I went wrong with that girl." Heat rose in my cheeks. Not embarrassment, anger. "Perhaps some children are just destined to disappoint their parents," he said with a theatrical sigh. "But tonight isn't about failures. It's about celebrating success stories like my son David. Thunder of applause. He returned to his table looking satisfied with his speech. Several people patted his shoulder, offering sympathy about having such a difficult daughter. James leaned over, whispering fiercely, "We're leaving. Now." "No." My voice was steady despite the fury burning in my chest. "Not yet." "Sarah, he doesn't even know I'm here. He's talking about me like I'm some distant embarrassment, not his daughter sitting 50 feet away." "That's exactly why we should wait." I stood up, smoothing down my dress. "I need some air. I'll be back." I walked toward the ladies' room, needing a moment to compose myself. In the hallway, I leaned against the marble wall, breathing deeply. 17 years. 17 years of proving myself, of becoming the person Mom would be proud of earning the respect of the world's most elite military unit. And Dad still saw me as a disappointment who plays soldier. When I returned to the ballroom, Dad was circulating among the tables, schmoozing with guests. His path brought him closer to our section, closer to me. James watched nervously as William Mitchell approached the nearby tables, glad-handing and laughing. Then he was at the table next to ours. Then the table behind us. Then he was standing right there, extending his hand to shake hands with the man at our table. "Bill Mitchell," he introduced himself with characteristic confidence. That's when his eyes swept across our table and landed on me. For the first time in 17 years, William Mitchell and his daughter Sarah locked eyes. Recognition flickered across his features. Surprise. Then something harder. What happens next will change everything, because 17 years of silence are about to explode in front of 280 people. And James, quiet, steady James, is about to show my father exactly who he's been talking about. 17 years. 17 years since William Mitchell had looked into his daughter's eyes. And in that moment, under the crystal chandelier lights of the St. Regis ballroom, I saw recognition flash in his eyes. Then something colder. "Sarah." His voice like a needle. Not sweetheart. Not a warm greeting. Just Sarah. Like calling the name of a stranger. 280 pairs of eyes began turning toward us, sensing drama unfolding. "Daddy." I stood up, my voice calm though my heart was pounding. He looked me up and down. The elegant black dress, simple jewelry, James standing beside me in his crisp suit. 17 years, he said, his voice loud enough for surrounding tables to hear. 17 years you disappeared, and now you show up here like nothing happened. The conversations around us gradually quieted. People began to pay attention. "David invited me," I said. "David." He looked toward my brother, who sat pale-faced at the family table. "He always had a soft heart for failures." The word hit like a slap. James stood up beside me, a few inches taller than my father, broad shoulders, solid and steady. "Mr. Mitchell," he said, his voice polite but with something dangerous underneath. "I'm James Rodriguez." "Ah," my father turned to James, eyes appraising. "Sarah's latest boyfriend. Let me guess, also a soldier?" "Her fiancé," James corrected, his voice still controlled. "And yes, I serve in the military." A mocking laugh from my father. "Of course. Sarah only knows that type of man." The ballroom was now almost silent. 280 of New York's most powerful people were watching William Mitchell confront his daughter after 17 years. "You know," Dad said, his voice higher now, performing for the audience, "I just told everyone about you. About how you've disappointed the family." "I heard," I said. "Good. Then you understand why I'm surprised to see you here, at an event for successful people." That sentence stabbed into my chest like a knife. But I still stood straight. I have a right to be here. "Rights?" He laughed loudly. "You think playing soldier gives you rights? You think wearing a uniform makes you important?" That's when I saw James stiffen beside me, his hands clenched into fists. "I tried for 35 years, Dad continued, his voice echoing across the ballroom. 35 years trying to turn you into a proper woman. But you chose to chase after the military, play around with men who have no future." He pointed at James. "Like this one. Young but already doesn't know how to do anything except hold a gun." That was the last straw. James stepped forward, tall and intimidating. His voice was cold as ice. "Mr. Mitchell, I think you need to know who you're talking to." "I know exactly who I'm talking to," my father replied, still confident. "My wayward daughter and her soldier boyfriend." James looked straight into his eyes. "No, you don't." Then he turned to the 280 guests, his voice carrying clearly. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to Admiral Sarah Mitchell." The ballroom fell dead silent. 4-star Admiral of the United States Navy, the youngest female admiral in SEAL history. I saw faces in the crowd change, from curiosity to shock. Medal of Honor recipient for Operation Silent Storm. My father had gone pale. 73 lives saved, 15 high-value targets neutralized, 8 years of combat deployments. James pulled out his phone, opened a video. Sound filled the ballroom. "Admiral Mitchell saved my life and 22 other crew members." A choked male voice. "She's a true hero." Another video. "Admiral Sarah Mitchell led the operation to rescue 73 international hostages." And another. "I am the President of the United States, and today I have the honor of presenting the Medal of Honor to Admiral Sarah Mitchell." The ballroom erupted in whispers, gasps, and "oh my gods." My father stood there, white as a sheet, staring at the videos. James continued, his voice like steel. "The woman you just called a failure has served this country for 17 years. She risked her life to protect others while you sat in your office counting money." 280 people began standing up, one by one, applauding. "The woman you said plays soldier has received every highest honor the military can bestow." The applause grew louder. More people stood up. "And the woman you're ashamed to call your daughter?" James paused, looking straight into my father's eyes. "Is a national hero." The entire ballroom was now standing, applauding. 280 CEOs, politicians, businessmen, all clapping for me. "Sarah, Sarah, Sarah," someone shouted, and the entire ballroom picked up the chant. I stood there, stunned by the thunderous applause. My father looked around, seeing 280 of New York's most important people celebrating his daughter as a hero. His face changed from white to red. "You know," James said, his voice meant only for my father amidst the chaos. For 17 years, she never said a bad word about you. Not even when you didn't come to her Naval Academy graduation. Not even when you didn't call to congratulate her when she received the Medal of Honor. He gripped my father's wrist, not hard but firm. But now, in front of these 280 people, you call your daughter a disappointment. Do you know what kind of person that makes you? William Mitchell, powerful CEO, respected throughout the city, for the first time in his life, looked small. David stood up from the family table, walked over, his eyes red-rimmed. "I'm ashamed of myself," he said, his voice shaking. "For 17 years I knew who you were, knew what you were doing, but I never had the courage to tell Dad." He turned to me. "Sis, I've been proud of you from day one. I was just a coward. I hugged my brother. It's okay, David. I understand." The applause began to die down, but 280 people remained standing, still watching us. A silver-haired CEO from the head table walked over. "Admiral Mitchell, I'm Robert Chen, CEO of Goldman Sachs. We're honored to have a hero like you here tonight." Then another. "Admiral, could I get a photo with you? My son is serving in Afghanistan." Then another. "Do you have a business card? My company wants to hire veterans." 280 people lined up wanting to shake hands, take photos, talk to me. And meanwhile, William Mitchell stood alone, watching his daughter be respected and admired by 280 of the city's most important people. Finally, when the crowd settled down, he approached me. His eyes were red. "Sarah," he said, his voice hoarse. "Sweetheart?" I quote. "You what?" I asked, my voice not angry, just tired. I was wrong. I've been wrong for 35 years. I looked at this man, who had once been everything to me, then became nothing, now standing asking for forgiveness in front of 280 people. "I know," I said, "but it's too late to change the past." "But it's not too late to change the future," he said. If you'll give me a chance." I looked at James. He nodded encouragingly. I looked at David. He smiled through his tears. I looked back at my father. "We'll see." And in that moment, under the crystal chandelier lights of the ballroom, in front of 280 people who had witnessed the truth, I felt 17 years of burden finally lift off my shoulders. Not because Dad had changed, but because I no longer needed his approval. 1 month after the gala, I was sitting in my Pentagon office, reviewing reports when my phone buzzed. A text from a number I hadn't seen in 17 years. "Sarah, may I call you? Dad." For the first time in his life, he signed Dad, not William Mitchell. I stared at the message for a long time, then replied, "Tonight at 8 p.m. I'll listen." 8 p.m., the phone rang. "Sweetheart." Dad's voice was hoarse, lacking its familiar confidence. "Dad, I want you to know, after the gala night, I've made some changes." I waited, saying nothing. "I donated $10 million to a Veterans Family Support Fund, and I started a scholarship program for military children who want to study business." "That's good," I said, my voice neutral. "But more importantly," he paused, "I've been going to therapy to understand why I treated you the way I did." This surprised me. "The therapist says I have toxic masculinity and gender bias deep-rooted from Grandpa's generation. I never learned how to love a daughter." I heard him take a deep breath. "You know, when I was young, Your grandfather also said men must be strong, women must be obedient. I grew up thinking that was truth. But you proved me completely wrong. Dad, I said gently, I don't need you to change for me. I need you to change because it's the right thing to do. You're right. And I want you to know, I framed that newspaper article about your Medal of Honor. It's hanging in my office, right next to David's Harvard graduation photo. For the first time in our conversation, I smiled. And I want to ask, would you allow me to attend your wedding? I thought about James, about the Sal brothers who would be there, about the ceremony we were planning. You'll have to sit in the audience, I said. David will walk me down the aisle. I understand, and I'll be proud to be there, even just as a spectator. The next morning, I received an email from CEO Robert Chen, who had approached me at the gala. Admiral Mitchell, Goldman Sachs would like to offer you the position of Director of Veterans Affairs with a salary of $2 million per year when you retire from the military. We need leaders like you. I forwarded the email to James. He replied immediately. They finally recognize what I've known for 8 years. You're unstoppable. That week, David came to visit me in D.C. Sis, he said as we walked along the Potomac River, I want to quit Dad's company. Why? Because I want to start a nonprofit organization helping military families, inspired by you. I stopped, looking at my brother. David, you don't have to copy me to prove your worth. I know, but watching you at the gala, I realized I've wasted 28 years trying to be the person Dad wanted instead of the person I wanted to be. I hugged my brother. Then do it. But do it for yourself, not for anyone else. Wedding day, 6 months after the gala. I stood in the tent at Naval Academy Chapel, looking out at the yard where 200 people were seated, the entire SEAL Team Alpha in uniform. David nervous in his tuxedo, ready to escort me. Ready, sis? He asked. I looked down at my wedding dress, simple, elegant, but I wore Mom's Mont Blanc pen in a small hidden pocket, a legacy of strength. Ready. We walked down the aisle. James stood at the altar in his dress uniform, his face bright when he saw me. 200 people stood up. SEAL brothers, David's friends, some colleagues from the Pentagon, and in the third row, William Mitchell sat quietly, tears streaming down his face. Not tears of sadness, but tears of regret and pride mixed together. At the reception after the ceremony, Master Chief Wilson approached me. Admiral, he said, I want to tell you something. Chief? 25 years training SEALs. I've never seen anyone tougher than you. Not just physically, but mentally. You overcame everything. Discrimination, family rejection, combat trauma. You are the definition of true strength. He saluted me. It's been an honor serving with you. Late in the evening, when guests began to leave, my father approached. Sweetheart, he said softly, thank you for letting me be here. Thank you for coming. I have something I want to give you. He handed me a small box. Inside was Mom's wedding ring, the ring I thought was lost forever. I kept it for 19 years. Thought you'd never need it. I was wrong. I slipped the ring onto my finger. Perfect fit. Your mother would be proud of the person you've become, he whispered. And I finally am too. As James and I drove away in the getaway car, I reflected on the journey. 35 years ago, I was a little girl desperate for Dad's approval. 17 years ago, I left home to prove myself. 6 months ago, I realized the most important thing. I didn't need anyone's permission to be great. Family isn't blood. Family is those who stand by you when the world turns against you. Family is James, who defended me in front of 280 strangers. Family is David, who finally found the courage to support me. Family is SEAL Team Alpha, who showed up to celebrate my wedding. And sometimes, if you're lucky, family also includes biological parents who finally learn to love you right. If you're watching this video and you're struggling with family who doesn't understand you, remember this. Your worth isn't defined by their approval. You define your own worth through your actions, your choices, and the impact you make on the world. Share your story in the comments. How did you overcome family disappointment? How did you find your chosen family? And if this story resonates with you, please subscribe to hear more stories about courage, resilience, and the power of living your truth. Sometimes revenge isn't fire. It's simply living better, stronger, prouder than anyone expected you to.